Unless, unless, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, it's not gonna get better. It's not. This is a quote from The Lorax, which is a 2012 film. This is a universe where air got so bad that they had to sell it out of these bottles to make a profit. Now, this quote from Urban Evolution's How Species Adapt and Survive in Cities, which is a College Board stimulus, says that impoverished neighborhoods tend to have higher temperatures, greater exposure to pollutants, and other environmental disadvantages. Why does this matter? This matters because the UN reports that over 400 million people are living in impoverished neighborhoods in Asia. This means that these impoverished people who are living in these impoverished neighborhoods feel the effects of climate change more than anybody else does. From this graphic from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you can see that climate change has been on the run. The climate change started increasing rapidly since the 1960s, and it has reached the 1 degree Celsius increase threshold. This means that we are feeling climate change effects more than we have ever had to in the last 200 plus years. And the people who are feeling it most are the impoverished. This is what brings me to my research question. How has air pollution due to climate change affected health in Asian countries in the last 50 years? And my answer to this, air pollution's effect on Asian countries has harmed the citizens' well-being, has hurt the working force, and has damaged the food supply. Researcher and climate change activist Anne Berg says that ambient fine particulate matter exposure, currently considered the leading environmental risk globally, is estimated to be associated with 4.2 million premature deaths. That means that there are 4.2 million people dying prematurely due to air pollution, which couldn't be stopped. And to define PM particles, the CDC defines it as particle pollution, also called particulate matter. PM is made up of tiny particles or solids or liquids that are in the air. These PM particles are 30 times thinner than a strand of hair, so you could barely see it with a very strong microscope. These PM particles are the main particle in air pollution. And on this graph, also provided by researcher Anne Berg, you can see that the total concentrations from air pollution are in Southeast Asia. The man-made concentrations are 49% in Southeast Asia, and the total concentrations just overall are 42%. And this is out of the Western Pacific, Southeast Asia, Europe, the Mediterranean, the Americas, and Africa. Air pollution in China is contributed to 1.6 million deaths per year. This is stated by researcher Kim, who's also a climate change activist. I also included a graph by researcher Sun, and this graph shows the positive correlation between air pollution and respiratory diseases such as respiratory diseases, chronic diseases, and cardiovascular diseases, and more. I have to include this because some researchers do not believe that there's a positive correlation, but as you can see, there's a 95% positive correlation between air pollution and these diseases. And researcher Zulan also reports that overall, the majority of these studies show a positive association between outdoor pollution, air pollution, and health. My second point is the workforce in Asia. In this graphic, we can see the vendors outside selling food. And you can see this because in Nepal, which is one of the countries in Asia, they have to go to more dense areas to increase the chances of sale. This is because the impoverished cannot simply skip a day of working. They depend on a day's wage. And to get the day's wage, they have to go to more dense areas which have more people. This is so that they can get their sales that they need. Researcher Stern has done multiple studies on the working class in Asia and outdoor air pollution. And on this graph, you can see that 66 or 2/3 of all the outdoors workers report that they have felt symptoms of air pollution such as asthma, throat irritation, and eye and nasal allergies. And he even goes to say that the most vulnerable work group is the outdoor workers. These are workers that are that are taxi drivers, vendors, and even more. My final point is food security. This graphic is provided to us by the World Resources Institution. And this graphic says air pollution reduces crop yields by up to 15% in wheat and soy and 5% for maize. This means that the decrease in food can cause food insecurity, and this means that the people on the lower side of economically or who have less money are going to have limited food resources. And over here by researcher Mahmoud, you can see that crop loss results in food insecurity, health problems, and malnutrition. And the people who are feeling this the most are the impoverished. This is another reason why we need to stop and make more laws preventing non-renewable resources so that air pollution would decrease. On this second graph by researcher Bernie, there's a lot, but here you can see that there's a very large percentage of pollution when the climate is very low. So the total number of wheat being reduced throughout the years has been 36%, and the total number of rice that has been decreased is by 20%, which is very large numbers because these are the crops that they use to trade and feed their country. Overall, what we need to do to stop air pollution is we need to be less dependent on non-renewable resources, and we need to switch to renewable resources. And they should also make legislation preventing factories and institutions from producing and letting so much air pollution into the environment, because even though I focused on Asia, this affects the whole world. And if we make a change to stop it, then we wouldn't have to live in a society like the Lorax where you have to buy clean air. And this concludes my presentation, and this is my works cited.
All right, 2 questions for you. First up, Michael.
Okay.
Stay there, so you're on
Stay
camera.
right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did your research question evolve as you moved through the process?
Well, actually, my research question was totally different beginning. It had to do with race inequality in college applications, but I saw that there wasn't enough consistent evidence on EBSCO for this, so I did see sources talking about air pollution. So I decided to research that instead, and I found that most studies were done in Southeast Asia, and that's also where the highest concentration was, so I decided to use that as my resource question.
All right. And what additional questions came up as you were going through the research process?
Well, this is very simple. Other questions that came up while I was researching were what other particles contribute to air pollution? Because I know I talked about PM particles in my presentation, but these aren't the only particles that make up air pollution as a whole. There are other particles that I didn't have the time to research and talk about that I wish I would have spoken about, but I also don't know where I would have fitted in my presentation.